Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Welcome. It is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, 8:01 p.m. Central Standard Time on the dot. It is the BTB Roundtable. We are here live on the Blog and the Boys YouTube channel, the Blog and the Boys Twitch channel, and the Blog and the Boys Facebook page. You can, of course, watch us live on any one of these platforms or catch the rewatch at your own particular convenience. You can also listen to the show at your own audio convenience on the Blog and the Boys podcast network. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you do, you will hear the talented voices of all the gentlemen joining me here tonight. You will also read their work at blogontheboys.com and see them here, obviously. My name is RJ Ochoa. We will go in clockwise order for the video audience, dressed as if he is in the Arctic, the North Pole, straight from Bozeman, Montana, as was the pre-show discussion. It is David Howman. Howman, how cold is it from a vibes standpoint? Like, are your knuckles cold? Are your hands drying out?
Yeah, it's bone chilling cold. And honestly, my head is kind of spinning right now between the cold and the fact that I'm in the position on the screen where I'm at, because I'm not used to being the first one here. So this is a unique experience for me all the way around.
You were the early bird, so congratulations on the worm. It is yours, but not the normal, kind of top right, sector of the screen. We have more than 4 people here tonight, counting you and I, of course. Tony, Catalina, you're actually in that kind of spot that you normally occupy, the top right, but again, not the quad box that we technically have. Tony, Dale Tisdale said in the chat, the Mighty Five. If you had to give the 5 of us a nickname, what would it be, and why would it be the Backstreet Boys? And tell us the story about your growing up that you did before the show, please.
That's for pre-show stuff. We don't get to talk about that, but no, yeah, I think the Backstreet Boys is a good name for the 5 of us.
Are you AJ? I think you're AJ or Brian. I think one of those two.
Man, I don't know. I guess I am.
Maybe we'll tap Rachel in and she can help answer this question since I think she's got a little bit more on lock when it comes to the pop culture sort of knowledge.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Sean Martin is here. It's been the 4 of us normally most of the weeks on the round table, but you came in and made us a quintuple sort of set. Sean, one of the newest residents of the aforementioned Montana. How are you doing this evening, Sean?
Hey, what's up, RJ? Yeah, can't name a Backstreet Boy, but good to be the 5th member here of of our discussion going into the playoffs. So it's not that cold in Montana. How many can take the beanie off?
Well, I left off 3 members. I think Kevin was a member, as was Nick Carter. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit. I'm forgetting the 5th one, which I would assume everybody did, just based on that particular data point. Danny Phantom, who was the 5th Backstreet Boy?
I don't know. I only know Nick Carter, and I wouldn't have remembered him had you not mentioned him right now.
Yeah.
So
you might as well be speaking a different language right now, RJ.
I can tell you the new kids on the block.
You know what? Maybe that's a post-show discussion, Danny. We've talked about the pre-show. We got to say some things for the post-show. David Smith in the chat says 4 panelists, 1 for each of the Cowboys' 2024 playoff wins. I like the vibe right there. Rick Ursulini says hi, RJ, Howman, Tony, Danny, and Sean. Watsamata says, alrighty, look at all these handsome panel members. Watsamata also offered a obvious here we go. Tony, could you give us a here we go, please?
Here we go.
That was okay.
I sound like Cooper Rush's.
Yeah,
here we go.
Yeah, Cooper Rush really just caught some huge strays, having to enter the game that late against Washington. And what was supposed to be a celebratory moment, it just became kind of a mocking one against Cooper Rush, which is unfortunate. Rachel Catalina, Tony says, we them boys, Backstreet, of course. So Rachel's, kind of vibing with what we're, putting down here. So you got to study up when, we're done with this show. Watsamata also offers, by the way, put some Dak in that. Here we go. All right. It is playoff week, Danny Phantom. So the intensity is high. The nerves are high. We have really enjoyed most of this Dallas Cowboys season, but it could all come crashing down on Sunday afternoon. That is the peril of this time of year.
That's true. I don't like to think about that. I want to at least enjoy this week. I'm excited. I feel pretty confident. So the nerves hasn't quite set in yet. So right now I'm just still enjoying this week.
Howman, are you nervous or confident or some semblance of both? Because speaking personally, I kind of, fluctuate. One moment I'm like, oh yeah, it is the first of 4 games. Another, it's like, oh no, they're going to lose and we're going to have to defend all these things for the next 6 months when people are freaking out about it. Like it's a high stress sort of situation.
Yeah, I mean, I save all my nerves for when the game actually kicks off, and then I'm just a nervous wreck for 3 hours, even when they're doing good. But through the week, I'm like, it's playoff time, and I'm just having good vibes. I'm excited. I'm ready. And, once the game kicks off, though, I'm going to be the blood pressure is going to raise a little bit.
Tony, Catalina, you fluctuate a lot. You go from Chicken Little to Super Homer. So I'm curious where your emotional well-being is at, 4 days from kickoff?
Yeah, it's not great. I'm the type of person who I actually told Rachel this after Sunday. I was like, I need to calm down because I might stroke out before Sunday. You wait all year to get back to this point. I've been waiting for this since the divisional round loss last year. It's kind of now it's here, and I'm like, how do I temper my emotions? And I have a running joke where I'm like, the Cowboys haven't made it to the Super Bowl because I don't know if I'm physically capable to handle that. So I think it's partly my fault.
Yeah, Sean, it is kind of fitting that it all starts with the Green Bay Packers because it's kind of a boogeyman. It's kind of a revenge tour, but it's not really like that so far in the past. But if you have enough scars of the past, it's a scar that still, is pretty prominent in all of our lives, but they're not the 49ers, but it's the wild card round. But if they win this game, they're in the divisional round. It's really hard to kind of dial in our emotional well-being.
Yeah, it is hard. Pretty much any Cowboys fan, no matter how long you've been around, has a memory of losing one of these playoff games to the Packers, whether it's the Dez Cats or Jared Cook and Aaron Rodgers knocking off Dak in his rookie year. So even, I had a fan bring up the ice ball the other day talking about this game. So no matter what generation of Cowboys fan you are, you know that you've had some bad outcomes against the Packers. Sure, we can talk about, this current team having good matchups against this current Packers team, but it doesn't really help with the nerves too much. Wish I could be less nervous for this game, but yeah, it's going to be a stressful one come Sunday.
All right. We're going to stick to a mostly positive sort of vibe here this evening because why the hell not? Like Tony said, we waited almost 52 entire weeks to get back to this particular point, and we're hopeful that we get to the exact point, of course, but the Cowboys have to get to through the Green Bay Packers first and foremost. It is a roundtable, which means there will be a winner. So far, the only points from the crowd have been handed out to Danny Phantom. Danny, you are off to a 10-point lead. Are you feeling cocky? Are you feeling arrogant? Where's your head at right now?
I'm feeling calm. I feel like, everything's breezy right now. I'm trying to just be in good spirit. So, I don't think you can faze me, RJ. So, you can try.
I definitely will. That's kind of the whole point of this particular thing. All right. First question for the group. David Howman, we start with you because you were the first one here. Will the Dallas Cowboys win on Sunday?
I sure hope so. It would be really, really depressing against this Packers team where, they're the youngest roster, Jordan Love making his first career playoff game ever. Just all of the adversity that they had to go through even to make it to the playoffs, and they snuck in at 9-8. This is a game that they should win. I'm confident that they're going to win. They have, I think, the second largest point spread of any team for wild card round. And that's not by accident. The Cowboys match up really well against the Packers. The defense is, they play well into what Jordan Love's weaknesses are. They've got the pass rush. They've got the ball hawking secondary. But also the thing that I'm really most excited for is Dak Prescott against this defense because they have not played well. They have a tendency to get beat by really good quarterbacks, and I think Dak's a really good quarterback. This offense is playing at such a high level, especially when they're in AT&T Stadium. So, I feel really confident about this one. So that's why I say I hope so, because if they didn't, then it would kind of be I'd have to be like Tony and say the sky's falling because it would kind of feel like that.
I think that's all well said, and you kind of covered all the bases, which makes everybody having to follow you a little bit more difficult. But Sean, will the Dallas Cowboys win on Sunday? David Howman has been your podcast co-host for a few weeks now on Hidden Yardage every Monday on our network. But your twist on this question, Sean, is why? Why specifically will the Dallas Cowboys win on Sunday?
Yeah, this is probably an obvious answer, but I'm going to go Dak Prescott and the Mike McCarthy offense against Joe Barry's defense. Trying to read behind enemy lines this week. It seems like Joe Barry is public enemy number one for Packers fans. They defensively want to get rid of him, even though they've put up some decent defensive performances. I think there's still some recognizable names like Darnell Savage and Quay Walker there, if you were drafting it, on the Packers defense. But overall, I don't think they intimidate you too much when it comes to what it's going to take to slow down the Cowboys on home turf, which really nobody's been able to do. So, yeah, I think the biggest reason why you look for why the Cowboys should be able to advance the divisional round here is, Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, being able to put up big numbers, make Jordan Love play from behind, get that pass rush going, and, put up a big number that they can't match.
Tony, I'm going to kick this one to you because the why not side of this conversation has generally been two words, at least as it's associated with the Green Bay Packers, and it's been Aaron Rodgers. But if we are sitting here on Sunday night lamenting, super pissed off, looking forward to 52 weeks from now to try to get this opportunity all again, why won't the Cowboys win? Why not? I mean, what would be the reason, the flaw, the identifiable one? Because it's the playoffs and weird crap can happen, but what is the obvious kind of chink in the armor?
I think for the Dallas Cowboys, it's obvious, right? Slow starts and shooting themselves in the foot. We've seen this team lose or get down to teams that they probably shouldn't have or shouldn't, in any sense of the term, get to that point. And it's really just because they'll make a mistake. There'll be penalties. They'll turn the ball over, or, they when the snowball starts rolling in a negative way, they have a tough time of kind of stopping it dead in its tracks. And even though ultimately they were able to handle Washington last week, but there were some moments where like, oh, this is kind of getting a little messy before it got clean. But if the Cowboys are going to lose this football game to an inferior opponent, it's going to be because they kept them in the game. It's going to be because the Cowboys did some things that gave the Packers life when they probably shouldn't have had it.
Danny Phantom, there has been a little bit of trepidation through each of the answers. In fact, you've been the most kind of stable, like Monica in the lightning round kind of sequence. Her hand was steady like a rock. She didn't have the answers written on there as Rachel hoped that she did. But these other dudes, they're kind of in the win. I don't know. I'm scared. I'm scared. But you said, no, I'm not worried. Like, you can't shake me here tonight, RJ. Leroy, in fact, Danny Phantom. So pretty much every game is I hope so. We need more faith and positivity than I hope so, especially against the Packers. This was the matchup, Danny, that a lot of us wanted, myself included. We did not want to face the Los Angeles Rams. So it should be a game that we feel pretty confident the Cowboys can win.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really understand why there's too much worry with this. I mean, we're the better team across the board. It's not really just about trying to win certain matchups. I mean, we should throttle this team. And Sean mentioned, I think the home field is huge just because the Cowboys, they just do better on that turf, and we're going to get a heavy dose of CD. We're not all the things that we love about this team we're going to see. It just, as Tony said, it would really take a series of unfortunate events for things to just go south, and I just can't imagine that this happens. They're so much better than this team, so that's why I'm not worried at all. I know that I'm really good at predictions, and I'm telling you right now, there's no way we're losing this game.
What was anyone can answer this? I'll start with you, Tony. What was the last game that it was a series of unfortunate events? Because the Cowboys lost to Miami and Buffalo, and maybe Buffalo's the answer because of the weird penalties at the beginning of the game. But I mean, it's kind of hard to trace things back and find a game where like the ball just bounced the other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, you said, I think it is the Buffalo game. They get a stop and Sam Williams gets a penalty or something else happens. And that's exactly what came to my mind when I say it's a snowball that doesn't stop rolling, where it's like, okay, we could stop the bleeding here, but they just don't. And then now you get so far out of the picture here that the game's like unrecognizable and you can't catch up. So yeah, that's the first one that came in my mind.
Howman, same question. Also, I appreciate the chat identifying that Honey had to come up on the screen. She's been nipping at all the wirings underneath my desk. So it was either she came up here or like everything blew up. So this was the choice that I made. But Howman, same question.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the Buffalo game, then I would go back to that first Philly game where, it was a close game and like they played well. But again, thinking about like the ball just didn't bounce their way. I mean, the Eagles had 3 different fumbles and they recovered all 3 of them. There was the Luke Schoonmaker touchdown that got taken away by an inch. Dak stepping out on the 2-point try, like just all these tiny little plays that could have, if they went the other way, could have completely shifted the outcome, and it just didn't go their way. But I mean, even then, like they were in that game, they had a chance right up to the very end. So that's why I feel good. Like I want to clarify, I'm not actually worried about the Packers. It's just my battered fan syndrome kicking in and saying like, well, hey, it's the playoffs. The first moment you get confident is like when this team will let you down. I hope I'm wrong about that. Everything that I've seen from this team this season, except for the 49ers game, has led me to believe that this team is going to be able to step up and they're going to be able to take care of business against Green Bay. But there's still that little tiny voice that's like, man, they could just completely blow it. You just never know.
Yeah, Sean, I mean, to that point, it's not even that they could blow it. It's that, They could have a penalty that a weird penalty could get called. The last time they played a playoff game against Green Bay, there was the weird Bryce Butler penalty that nobody understood at the time or even now. Sometimes it's just, it's the rub of the green. Like sometimes it's just not your day. And it feels like that is, look, what a surprise. The Cowboys have lost games when it hasn't been their day, but like they haven't seemingly had a playoff game where everything broke right for them. And not saying that needs to happen, but they've kind of caught the like negative end of the spectrum. So as long as they kind of live somewhere in the middle of the line, like they're the better team.
They are. And I think, we spent a lot of time talking about the offense and how we like their matchup against the Packers defense, but that could be, volatile. And that's where you have the more likely chance of, a tip ball that leads to a Prescott interception or a fumble. That's where you might see these things that, we're talking about could keep this game even. But then the question is, can Dan Quinn's defense be enough of a force in this game that, make any of that irrelevant? Can they just shut down this Packers offense that hasn't had too many great performances down the stretch? Can they get the pass rush going and really just make it a moot point to where, you get a comfortably lead throughout the afternoon because the defense isn't really giving up much? So that's kind of what we should be focusing on when it comes to, the ways that this game could go wrong. Defensively, do you see the Cowboys having a breakdown after really ending the season with back-to-back pretty solid performances against the Lions and Commanders? I don't think that's going to happen for this defense right now.
Danny Phantom, Brandon Laurie is in the chat, not a part of the roundtable. Brandon, we hope you're having a great evening. It says the Seahawks game showed the defense and Deron Bland could be beat, but the offense went punch for punch, which gives me confidence they could come back in any tough situation. The Cowboys have kind of won every which way this season, Danny.
Yeah, they have. And I can't see a scenario where the offense struggles in this one. But it's funny you asked this question because, when you did look back at the games against Green Bay, there's a lot of games where the Cowboys did give a lot of turnovers. I mean, you all remember Rudy Ford, when he was having a field day. And then it wasn't too long ago, and the Cowboys put up 500 yards of offense, and then they still had 3 picks. Remember, Dak was still throwing picks. So, and then, of course, the playoff history with all the weird stuff, too. So there are those things that are out there, but I believe this team is it's mistake proof. It's they're able to get themselves in situations where this isn't going to be an issue. We're not going to see this type of risks, I guess, against this team. I really feel like the Cowboys, they know what they need to do. We're going to see a very well-oiled team coming in there, and similar to what we did in the wild card against Tampa Bay, and it's just going to be a really one-sided game.
All right, so general kind of temperature seems to be positive. Also, in case anybody's curious, Honey's been kicked out, just a little bit too mischievous this evening. So not her fault, but totally her fault if we're being straight up about this. I like where y'all are at. Y'all are all kind of on the same page, but you were on very, very different pages when it came to the prompt that I handed out towards each of you earlier this afternoon. This is an update on the score before we get to kind of the meat of tonight's show. Tony, Sean, you both have 24 points. Howman, 22. You're riding caboose. Danny Phantom, after that strong lead, 31. So let's see if you can hold strong all night long. Tony, did you just yawn? Was that like a sign of disrespect? Like you're not worried about, not being in the lead right now?
Jordan flu game.
It's a genuine yawn there, yeah.
Okay. So
OJ, what's your favorite Seinfeld character?
It's Jerry. I mean, he's
George.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard like a million times, like, oh man, Jerry's your favorite when you're younger and George is your favorite when you're older. Like, I get it and it's fine, but like the volume of people that have said that actually make me want to disagree with that take. So I'm holding strong with Jerry. George is funny. You know what? If I power rank them, Elaine's better than George. How about that?
Whoa, no.
Elaine's better than George. And you know what? I won't go any farther than that. But I mean, still, Elaine is funnier than George, contextually speaking.
That might be the worst take. Okay, moving on.
I stand by it. Anyway, also, Nicholas says +5 to me for being tough but fair on Honey. I gave her a chance. I mean, I think we can all, all of you are my witnesses for when my wife gets on to me later. But anyway, so I asked each of our roundtablers this earlier. They all submitted their answers. We certainly are interested in hearing what the live chat has to say. Who were the 5 players/people you trust the most? Obviously, within the Cowboys, we included the word people because I allowed them to go coaches or coordinators or whatever they wanted. Danny Phantom was the only person to ask a follow-up question, and for that, he gets an extra 3 points. He said, does it have to be individual people, or can it be collective groups like the pass rush or something like that? I specified it's individual people. So Danny, congratulations on that 3-point bump. Maybe it really is your night. So we're looking for 5 players. By the way, Brandon says that Lloyd Braun is the best Seinfeld character. So, there's that. All right. Ninja says that show was trash. Goodness gracious, Sean, you sent us down quite the rabbit hole. Tony, have you seen an episode of Seinfeld, by the way?
I've seen them all. Yeah, that's my show.
So that's a show that you've seen every episode of.
Yeah.
We found one.
Yeah, exactly. I saw the shirt. I'm in there. Yeah. It's not The Office, but
You know what, Tony? I'm really proud of you. Tony, you get a 7-point bump, Tony, because it is so rare for you to have seen a show. So we'll get that for you. We'll get yours, Danny. So again, the 5 people / players you trust the most. I also asked our roundtablers to rank them. We see a lot of comments right now. Johnny Boy says Dak, Micah, CD, Zach Martin, Ferguson. KHY001 says Dak, BA, CD, talking about Brandon Aubrey, of course, not Bruce Arians, the most overrated, offensive mind in the 21st century. CD Lamb, Brandon. This is a tangent of mine. I really hate how everybody always acted like, oh man, Bruce Arians, he's the quarterback whisperer. Wow, I bet, the guy who worked with Peyton Manning and Ben Roethlisberger and, Andrew Luck and Tom Brady and Jameis Winston, a Heisman winning #1 overall pick. What a surprise that this dude really had success with the quarterbacks that he was coaching. So again, I've had this argument many times.
What a hill to die on. Wow.
Look, I have takes. All right. But these are about your takes, guys. So KHY001 says Dak, BA, CD, Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson, Tyler Smith, and Tyron Smith. David Smith says plus RJ for the BA take. That's right, people. All right. Recognize, wake up, open your eyes. Rick Ursulini says Dak, CD, Micah, Aubrey, D-Law. Omar says Dak, Parsons, D-Law, Ferguson. Again, a lot of these names are going to be populating all of the answers. Dale Tisdale just comes in nice and simple, says, I trust Mike McCarthy. I have organized, before we get there, we'll get to Brandon Laurie's list. Number 1, Butter Aubrey. 2, DeMarcus Lawrence. 3, CeeDee Lamb. 4, Dak Prescott. 5, Dan Quinn. Here we go. These are all of your answers in your 5th spot. So somebody has Micah Parsons at number 5, Jake Ferguson at number 5, CeeDee Lamb at number 5, Brandon Aubrey at number 5. Danny Phantom, who do you think had Jake Ferguson at number 5?
I'm going to guess Tony.
You would be wrong. How embarrassing. It was not Danny Phantom, so he didn't, throw the question or anything like that. It was David Howman. Howman, bit of a spoiler alert. You are the only person to have Jake Ferguson on your entire list. So defend why Ferguson is a top 5 trustable player for the Cowboys entering the playoffs.
Well, really, I think it came down to 2 things for me. One is his actual performance on the field. I mean, he's just been such a sure thing when he gets thrown the ball his way, whether it's those short dump off passes and then he picks up the yards after the catch, or whether he's going down the seam and getting those big plays. And the chemistry that Dak has with him that they've developed over the season has been a great thing to watch. And, in this last game, they threw to him and he caught every single pass. And he's had a few games where he's either caught every single pass or had like maybe one where he didn't catch it. He's just very reliable when you go his way, however you're doing it. But also just the attitude that he brings to this team. Like we've seen it a few times now. He just has that dog mentality. Like he is the fighter. He's the one who's going to energize the team. And I think that's kind of, you need a guy like that going into the playoffs, especially, when you're so heavily favored against a team like the Packers. And there's, like we talked about, there might be that concern about like getting too full of yourselves, having to let down. Like Jake Ferguson's the guy that's going to get everyone pumped up. He's going to get them energized. And if they do come out and they're a little sluggish to start, like he's going to make sure everybody is getting their energy up. He's going to make a big play. They're all going to rally behind him. So I think that combination of his play and the demeanor that he brings, I trust he's going to be ready to go, and I trust that that's going to have a trickle-down effect to the rest of the team.
That's well said. I bet the rest of you feel pretty dumb for not including Jake Ferguson on your list after what Howman had to say there. As everyone can see, one of you had CeeDee Lamb as their number 5. David Smith chimed in, said CeeDee at 5, double question mark, -5 points for that. Tony Catalina, defend CeeDee Lamb being number 5 on your list, please.
Yeah, I think I knew people would probably take that as a negative because of the numbers and stuff, but I think it's more of a respect for, how many different guys they do trust on this team. When it comes to CeeDee Lamb, top 5 is not a bad thing. I mean, realistically, he's one of the 5 guys that I trust the most on the team. it's just kind of the position and kind of the way games flow sometimes. I know they've been force feeding them, but again, I don't really know how to spin this in any way that's negative because I didn't at all look at it in a negative light. For me, there are 4 other guys that I trust and hope that will, have a big impact. And, as far as I'm concerned, if you're in the top 5, I think that's a solid number.
Danny Phantom, you have Brandon Aubrey at number 5 on your list, which means Sean had Micah Parsons. Bit of a spoiler as well for the rest of this conversation. This is Brandon Aubrey's only mention. Brandon Laurie had Brandon Aubrey number 1 on his list, but Howman did not have him on his list. Tony did not have him on his list. Sean did not have him on his list. Danny, you barely got him in by the hair on his chinny chin chin. But why did Brandon Aubrey make it over other players for you?
Well, first off, I started with Aubrey at number 5 because I wanted to make sure not to leave him.
Ultra respect.
So I tell you what, I mean, if we're talking about trust, I don't know if there's anyone else that we could trust more than Brandon Aubrey, to be quite honest, because
except the 4 people that you ranked ahead of him, right? Obviously.
You know what? He's a kicker. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a kicker. But he's an important kicker, and he's an important player for the Cowboys, and he's just been extremely reliable. And I feel so bad for him the way the things unfolded. And, I know they had to mess with his psyche to have a kick, blocked and ruin his record and everything. But, I mean, gone is the feeling of, like, what's going to happen when the kicker trots on the field for a field goal. And the guy's 10 for 10 with 50 plus. I mean, that's crazy. It's like we get Dan Bailey and Brett Maher. You get the best of both worlds. I just think that he's done a fantastic job. Laurie's right. He needs to be mentioned, and it's disrespectful not to include him. So he's got to be on the list.
Sean, do you feel silly for having Parsons all the way down at number 5, especially considering, the other players that were ranked in that spot?
Well, first, let me say my logic for not including Aubrey is that I want the Cowboys to score touchdowns instead of field goals.
Okay, so you want to render his strength insignificant is your goal.
Yes.
Okay.
Except on extra points, which has been an adventure in the playoffs for the Cowboys just last year, and not expecting that to be the case this time around. Parsons is hard to pick a spot for on this list. I mean, I almost wanted to not include him at all just because it's like an obvious answer, and let's find 5 other things to talk about, or do you put him up there at 1? So he ended up at 5 for me just because, he still is a young player, kind of getting that playoff experience. We don't necessarily know, if he has to have kind of that breakout huge game for this team to win. I know you said leading up to the Lions game, RJ, that you're worried about Jared Goff and the offense, and let's see if Parsons can kind of be, that take over the game type of player in that one. He had a lot of help in that game. The rest of the defensive line really stepped up. Lawrence was fantastic. Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler. They all had to say in the pass rush in that game. We hope for more of the same in the playoffs, but if that's not happening and it does have to be Parsons, that's why he deserves a spot in this list, and he ends up in my final spot here at number 5.
Okay, so that was number 5 on all of y'all's list. We're going in ascending order if that is not obvious. Danny Phantom, you had Micah number 4 on your list. That's a bit of a spoiler here in terms of these answers, but we obviously just talked about him. 2 people had Dan Quinn as number 4 on their list. And I'll go ahead and say this now. Dan Quinn was the only person to appear on everybody's list. So of all the other names you can think of, there's somebody who did not have them on their list at all. Dan Quinn, once again, the only person 100% represented. But so that being said, Danny, who do you think has Dan Quinn at number 4? There are 2 people. You have 3 options, so it's kind of in your favor.
Well, actually, it's pretty easy because, let's see. I know it's not me. So
right. Those are words that I said. So, you're just repeating things right now. Okay.
Yeah. So, my gosh, actually, it's not easy. These guys are just so all over the place with, oh man. Who would have not picked him? Who would have picked him higher is what I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to go because of the disrespect and the weird stuff's been said in past shows by the guys upstairs. I'm going to say that Sean has Quinn here.
Sean is the only person who does not have Dan Quinn at number 4 on this list. Outside of you, Danny Phantom, Tony and Howman both had him at number 4 on their list. Howman, I start with you because you're a Mike McCarthy truther. Team Mike McCarthy did nothing wrong. Aaron Rodgers continues to prove us right in that capacity almost on a daily basis. But David Smith said, I'm not sure I trust Dan Quinn over Mike McCarthy. Nicholas Frank says -5 everybody because Dan Quinn low-key took a step back. Watsamata Howman says, I love DQ, but not on my top 5 list. Too many games he has failed to adjust to some offenses that I thought could be stopped. Your thoughts, David?
Well, to be honest, I kind of was debating back and forth about, like, you know, does Dan Quinn really belong on this list?
He's on your list. Stand up for it. Come on.
He is on the list. He is on the list. I'm telling you, he made it for a reason. And because I refuse to let recency bias color my judgment on this. The defense has not been as great as it has been the last few weeks. Granted, you know, there's been a lot of injuries. For the most part, all season long, Dan Quinn has done a good job, and this defense has done a good job of adjusting to those things. Some of this is just, you know, that the personnel, the offenses they face have been a good match to exploit some of those weaknesses where they have some injuries. But also, I thought about Dan Quinn and his career in context, both, you know, his defensive coordinator days in Seattle, what he's done in Dallas the last couple of years as defensive coordinator, and then when he was in Atlanta too as the head coach. Like, those were all marked by pretty solid performances in the playoffs, you know, defensively from his team as a whole. Like, this man, he may not have actually won that Super Bowl, but he got to the Super Bowl. He also did that as a coordinator. Like, he has a history of delivering in the playoffs. And so, I mean, and the man, I mean, he deserves all the praise out there for what he's done for this defense and the way he turned it around in such a short time. So I was like, I'm not crazy thrilled with how things have been the last few weeks. And I've definitely, you know, given my fair share of criticism to Dan Quinn for some of his adjustments or lack thereof in the games. But when it comes to the playoffs, like, I really can't think of another defensive coordinator out there I'd rather have on this team right now than Dan Quinn, just because of his experience, you know, what he does for this defense and his experience throughout his career.
So first of all, this is embarrassing. I can't read my own notes. In a rare RJ Ochoa mistake, Dak Prescott is also represented on each of your lists. So, you know, that's the only mistake I'll make all year. Promise you that. Tony, Catalina, you know, Howman made a legitimate case, and the crowd kind of echoed that in a lot of the comments. But, I mean, Brandon Laurie mentioned the Seattle game. Dan Quinn didn't force a single punt in that game. Dan Quinn got worked in Buffalo. You know, wasn't quite a working against Miami, but I mean, to have him over some other people is kind of a slight. I mean, it's more hope based. It's more trust based, long-term trust based than it is in terms of how he's playing right now, which is a benefit that not everybody is afforded.
Yeah, I may have a unique take on this, but my feeling is I think Dan Quinn's going to have these guys prepared. I think he is a really, you know, elite level preparer of his team. He does different things, like the Izzy Mukuamu playing cornerback last year in the playoffs is something that comes to mind, where he's not holding things back, but he has different wrinkles he can use. What I worry about, or not worry about, is the reason why I didn't put him in my top 3 most important is because I believe in the players, not the plays. And ultimately, it's going to be the guys on the field that get the job done here. I think Dan Quinn can, you know, set the recipe up and make sure that they're in good positions. But ultimately, it's going to be Micah. It's going to be the team that gets it done. But I have faith in Dan Quinn. I believe that he can, you know, put the right pieces together here. Yeah, I think you could. I think honorable mention. I could mention Mike McCarthy because what he has done for this team, and you know, what he's done for Dak Prescott is really, you know, been an elevated level this year. But I believe Dan Quinn has been somebody who, you know, we've been on the show and we've tried to bring him down to earth sometimes because of the crazy, you know, the crazy credit and maybe the crazy, you know, shade he doesn't get sometimes. But I think he is somebody that when it comes to these wild card playoff type situations, he's going to give you your best.
Way to spoil your own list. Tony does not have Mike McCarthy on it. So, you know, we'll see how the rest of this goes. Johnny Boy says Howman is speaking to Dan Quinn's effectiveness, but it fails to deliver all the time. Therefore, not the most dependable. To be fair to the prompt was trust, not you know, dependability. Depends how you define those two different things. I understand they're synonymous to a lot of people. But Omar, by the way, says +10 Tony that the players are the ones getting things done. Interesting, Tony, that you had Dan Quinn ranked above CeeDee Lamb, a player. So
yeah, I mean, wide receivers, it's finicky sometimes, right? Like we've seen him against the 49ers and it changed everything, right? The CeeDee Lamb 49ers game kind of changed everything for him. Is honestly his legacy, and even this year, just in specific terms. But at wide receivers are tough. They can bracket coverage. They can sometimes, there may be a point in this playoffs where it's going to be everybody but CeeDee Lamb that has to do the thing, including Jake Ferguson. So it's just tough to say, hey, this one guy is going to absolutely go nuts every game.
Number 3, we've got the first DeMarcus Lawrence mention. We got another Dan Quinn. First Micah Parsons mention. I'm sorry, not the first, but the first Dak Prescott mention. It was not you, Sean, who said Dak Prescott. Who do you think has 2 players above Dak Prescott on their list?
I'm going to go with Danny on that one. Yeah, I think he's got some other players besides Dak here.
It is Danny Phantom, who has Dak Prescott at number 3 on his list. Danny Phantom, why do you trust 2 other people more than Dak Prescott?
Well, are we getting into that? You want me to talk about my 1 and 2?
Or let me rephrase the question. Is Dak not the person who you trust the most on this team, obviously, given the way he's playing? Because I think if we ask like every Cowboys fan in the world, outside of the ones that have just made it like their life's mission to not enjoy Dak Prescott because reasons, I think most, like if you asked a random bar full of people, I think they'd be like, yeah, Dak's number 1 on my list, but he's not number 1 on your list. That's my question.
Yeah, no, I get. So the thing is, and I actually struggled. I went back and forth with my 2 and 3. And for me, I think Prescott has a lot to prove. And I think the way he's been playing has earned a lot of trust. I certainly feel better about Dak going into this postseason. I do still think, you can have the plays out there, but the quarterback's still got to make the reads and still got to do the work. And I feel like, he's going to be comfortable enough. He's playing better than he's played in a long time. And I think he's making great decisions. He's calling out the right protections. Everything's coming together. And I feel like it's because of the past failures. I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because I think this guy, he gets it every year. It's like, what does he do? He doesn't, win the big games. I mean, he's in an MVP conversation this year, but people weren't even putting him in their top 5 of quarterbacks or top 10. Sometimes there's so much disrespect with Dak, but I think it comes down to what he needs to do right now. And so far he hasn't. And I'm not saying Dak's cost us games, but has Dak been there and won us games? I mean, it's hard to count those, in the postseason. So I feel like this is a real prove it game for Prescott. That's why, to me, I'm putting him there because I want him to prove. I want him to prove that he belongs higher on my list.
Casey kind of echoed your point, Danny. He said we've rolled into the playoffs with the number 1 scoring offense before, but I feel like our offense has sputtered routinely in the playoffs recently, aside from Tampa Bay, which I think everybody would agree was one of the finest offensive outings, throughout the Dak Prescott era. Sean, you had Dan Quinn as number 3 on your list. Somebody had DeMarcus Lawrence. So you got a 50-50 shot here. If you get this right, because you got Danny right, I'll give you 15 points. So who had DeMarcus Lawrence at number 3 on their list between Howman and Tony?
Let's go Tony on that one.
Ooh, so close. Tony did not have DeMarcus Lawrence. He had Micah Parsons. David Howman, who had Tank? Sean had Tank number 4. We need to give DeMarcus Lawrence some love. Johnny Boy RN says Tank equals Mr. Dependable equals I trust D-Law. I didn't put together a list, Howman, but I think there's an argument, if you're not going Dak Prescott at number 1, to go DeMarcus Lawrence. He's been on fire as of late.
Yeah, he's having arguably the best year of his career just in terms of being an all-around defensive playmaker. Like he's been incredible against the run. He's had countless times where he's just blown up a run play in the backfield. A few of them coming on like either 3rd down in a big stop where they're going to punt it, or coming on 4th down where you absolutely need that play. He's also been reliable in the pass rush. Granted, he's not putting up Micah Parsons numbers, but very few people are putting up Micah Parsons numbers. But DeMarcus Lawrence, just all-around player. Like there are a few out there that are better than him at this position all the way around. Obviously, there's some who are better at rushing the passer, some who are better at just run defense. He does everything. Not only that, but similar to what I was talking about with Jake Ferguson and the kind of the demeanor he brings, DeMarcus Lawrence is, one of the more vocal leaders on this defense. It seems like every time you're watching that Sounds of the Sideline video, which is appointment television every time it comes out, like you're always getting a clip at least one time of DeMarcus Lawrence, like pumping up his teammates, giving a speech. Like if things are going bad, he's telling them like, we're going to get right back in it. If things are going good, he's like, let's keep the pressure on. Don't let up. Keep going at it. And it's kind of the same logic I had with Jake Ferguson of like, I trust DeMarcus Lawrence. He's not only going to show up ready to play, but he's going to make sure his teammates show up ready to play. So I just have all the confidence in him, all the trust in him to be able to do what needs to be done on Sunday.
Sean, you were the first person to have DeMarcus on your list. You had him at number 4. The chat really agrees with you by nature and Howman what he said. Steve says Tank doesn't get his due just based solely on sack numbers. Nicholas says D-Law blows up a lot of cute plays, and in today's league, that's crazy valuable. He came so close to getting to Tyreek Hill in the backfield in Miami. Like, that is kind of his specialty. In some ways, Sean, DeMarcus Lawrence is kind of emblematic of the Cowboys, overrated or underrated rather for this particular reason, a silly goalpost moving sort of thing. The fact that he is here over Deron Bland, over Jaron Kearse, I don't think anybody would have predicted, at least at the beginning of the season. I mean, the fact that he is kind of shot for shot with Micah Parsons on a trust basis is a really, really important thing.
Yeah, momentum is a real thing in the playoffs. It's why nobody's picking the Eagles to, do anything this postseason, for example, because the way they're going in. And DeMarcus Lawrence couldn't be playing better football, even at any point in his career, than he is right now going into this playoff run. And there's not that long of a list of players on this Cowboys roster where, you truly feel like their playoff opportunities are that limited. We know the consistency McCarthy has established to make the playoffs year in and year out. This core of guys going to be here, but if you did have to put that list together, and I almost included the other one that you would immediately think of on my top 5 for tonight, and that would be Zach Martin. But DeMarcus Lawrence certainly goes on that list as far as, guys who should be ready to take full advantage of knowing the playoff opportunities aren't going to always come around, and seize the moment of getting this defense ready, which certainly they seem like that they are based on their performances against the Lions, where Tank was outstanding on Saturday night, edition of Monday Night Football, and then his performance against the Commanders as well. So Tank has done it all. He's the leader of this defense. When he's going well, everything else falls into place of other guys we could put on this list, but it really all starts with Tank, the way he's playing right now. It's why he's number 4 on my list.
Nobody had Zach Martin on their list. I think that's a little bit of an upset. By the way, just so everybody knows, Sean owns a Zach Martin jersey.
I do.
Specifically because of his last name. I don't know if that was obvious, but a little bit of narcissism behind Sean's reasoning there. But, we're all like that.
I almost wore it tonight, but I decided not to. Yeah, I was gonna...
Lots of love for DeMarcus Lawrence, which takes us to our number 2. So we have a lot to get to on this front. Tony, I will spoil yours because you have DeMarcus Lawrence at number 2. You had Micah Parsons at number 3. So you actually, and not a disrespect thing, kind of like your CD at number 5 thing. This is just simply a testament, I believe, as to how well DeMarcus Lawrence is playing right now.
Yeah, I think whether it's his play, whether it's leadership, whether it's his demeanor, the attitude in the locker room, the way he rallies the troops, there was only one person on this team I thought had a bigger impact on this team that I could trust more than DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, beyond the tape, a lot of the same things, I'll echo the sentiments that Howman said. Like, he does so many gritty things well, so many things right. He just makes a play when you need it. It almost seems unfair when there's like a 3rd and short or a 4th and short to be like, DeMarcus Lawrence is about to make a play here. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes he's just not going to. That's just not the reality of the situation, but you almost expect it every time you get in those tight spots. Like, he's a leader of men. He's somebody that you can set your watch to. He's a guy, I mean, he's a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. He's somebody that, like, is the epitome of consistency. So for me, if I didn't put him at 1 because of one pick that we'll get to, I had to put him at 2 and give him the respect he deserves.
That's well said. I feel like DeMarcus Lawrence, speaking of jerseys, like kind of a rare jersey. Like, you don't see a lot of people walking around with a Lawrence 90 jersey. Kind of a let's change that. All 4 of you go ahead and order one. You have my blessing.
There was a moment in time where you could like define a Cowboys fan by if he had a Byron Jones jersey or not. It was like the defining, like, they know their stuff type of thing if they had a 31 Byron jersey. And I think you were one of the leaders of like pushing people to get that one, RJ.
Yeah, he was never a great 31, if I'm being honest. Like, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, but he was a great player. But like DeMarcus Lawrence, he didn't have interceptions, and so everybody was like, he sucks, he stinks, blah blah blah.
But he did have a pick. You like blasted him for running it into the end zone against the Commanders, whatever they were called at that point, because I
think Danny might be the only one who was at Blog on the Boys at the time. I believe in 2017, Byron Jones caught a tip ball. There was an interception in Washington. and ran it back. And I wrote an article saying how that
For
was
like
stupid.
20 yards. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but it was stupid and it was the incorrect decision. I mean, he could have gone down and the Cowboys could have taken a knee. And my point was correct. Like everybody was like, oh, quit being a square and blah, blah, blah. And in the video or in the play, you can see Sean Lee telling him to go down. So I think we've all had a moment where we've responded to every comment in an article on the site. That was one of those for me where I was just arguing with people constantly. Tony,
Well, I've never had that moment, but go ahead, Tony.
I was just saying he should have got down because my brother was coming for him. My brother was going to tackle him, cause a strip sack, change the whole complexion of the game. But no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if they'd lost. You know what I mean? Because he gave kept things alive. Like it was so frustrating to me that nobody wanted to admit that, just in the name of something being cool. I mean, we can all be logical about things. That's how I like to live my life. Tony, you had DeMarcus Lawrence at number 2 as mentioned. There is a Mike McCarthy mentioned here. This is not only the first Mike McCarthy mention, this is the only Mike McCarthy mention. In fact, we just had a comment right now from Brandon says Mike McCarthy should get more credit. Too often last year, Dak and the receivers weren't on the same page. Mike McCarthy took over play calling duties and cleaned up the verbiage for the offense to settle in. So, Tony, even though each of you had the opportunity to put Mike McCarthy in your top 5 of most trusted players, people on the Cowboys at this moment in time, one of the high-flying offenses in the NFL has gotten the best Dak Prescott we've ever seen. What a shock. Dak's going to be number 1 on some of these lists. The best CeeDee Lamb we've ever seen. I mean, he's only represented one time here. Tony Catalina, who was it that had Mike McCarthy on their list and obviously at number 2?
It's got to be Howman.
Yeah, you're getting no points for that because that was really predictable. David Howman, what the hell is up with the disrespect here? I mean, why is Mike McCarthy? What would have to happen for Mike McCarthy to get a crumb of credit?
I wish I knew, because it would be nice just to have something that would tell us that he's going to get any credit.
And to your credit, Howman, you have him number 2. You're not just getting him in at number 5. You have him at number 2. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows that I've been a McCarthy defender. Although, ironically, he wasn't my choice for the head coach opening when the Cowboys were hiring. When they hired him, I was kind of I don't hate it. I like it. If he follows through on some of the things he says he's going to, I'll get really on board. And then he did. But everything that he has done this year, obviously, with the big difference being him taking over offensive play calling, just the difference that it's made. Everything has been so much better. And granted, it was not completely perfect from the very start. There were some growing pains. There were some adjustments that had to be made. But guess what? He made those adjustments. He went into that bye week and he said, hey, things are kind of going okay, but they're not great. We can be doing better. We're not featuring CeeDee Lamb enough. We're not getting Brandon Cooks the ball enough. There's things that we can be doing better. And then they came out and they started feeding CeeDee. They got Brandon Cooks. Jake Ferguson ascended to be one of the top young tight ends in the NFL. And I mean, they started using more motion. They started, just doing a whole bunch of different things that we've been begging this team to do. They got more pass happy. They put the ball in Dak's hand and said, hey, Dak Prescott, we think you're a great quarterback. We think you're the leader of this team. We're going to trust you to go out there and lead this offense. And then guess what happened? As they started dominating through the air, the things started opening up for the run game. Tony Pollard starts looking like Tony Pollard again. Everything was just clicking into place. And am I saying that there hasn't been any moment where maybe you don't like the play call or he has a bad series where things don't work out? No, of course not. He's human. But you can turn on the Chiefs and Andy Reid and you can see play calls where you're Andy Reid shouldn't have called that. And of course, Chiefs fans will then say, well, that was Matt Nagy. That wasn't actually Andy Reid. We'll make excuses for him. But really, I think Mike McCarthy is really the perfect fit for Dak Prescott, because these are two guys where all they've done through their career is produce. They win. They do what they're supposed to do. And for whatever reason, you look around the NFL, nobody gives them credit. There's always a reason why Dak, doesn't deserve the MVP. He doesn't deserve consideration for these awards. He's not actually that good. And there's a reason why Mike McCarthy is just not a good coach. He has no idea what he's doing, which really we should, if that's the case, we should be talking about Stephen Jones for Executive of the Year. If he's good enough to field a team that's so good, they win 12 wins 3 straight years with just this guy who can't coach his way out of a paper bag. He must be the greatest GM of all time if we're going to go that route, right?
That's always my argument too, Howman. Like if Dak sucks, if he's a middling quarterback, and if McCarthy sucks, then like what is the thing that has them like constantly having all these like high levels of success? That's a great point. And nobody's going to agree that it's Stephen Jones, obviously. To your point, and this was what Casey said in the chat. This has absolutely been the best year for McCarthy. However, I've seen his poor clock management. And the point you brought up, Howman, people forget because it feels like forever ago now. Once upon a time, that was Andy Reid's thing. Everybody used to kill Andy Reid for how Andy Reid, he's going to find a way to bungle the clock. Andy Reid's not going to give the ball to Jamar Charles or LaShawn McCoy when he absolutely has to. Like Andy Reid had those like obvious whoops-a-daisy mistakes that everybody would kill him for, wins a couple Super Bowls, and nobody wants to talk about those things anymore. Tony guessed you right, Howman, obviously, for having Mike McCarthy here. We know that Tony had Tank Lawrence at number 2, so that leaves one person who had Dan Quinn at number 2, not Mike McCarthy. Your choices are Danny and Sean. Who do you think it was?
Well, didn't Danny already have Dak at 3?
This is your question to answer, Howman, not mine. I mean, I'm not, I'm not tipping.
I mean, I'm not good at math, but I'm pretty sure we already figured that one out. I'll go Sean.
You think Sean had Dan Quinn at number 2? You're wrong. Sean has Dak Prescott at number 2. Danny Phantom, you went with another Dan and Dan Quinn. So Mike McCarthy not on your list. Dan Quinn, who went ultra soft against the Dolphins and let them kind of kick that game-winning field goal, makes the list, but Mike McCarthy doesn't.
Oh yeah, easy without question. I mean, if we had 10, McCarthy wouldn't be on my list for sure. I mean, but one thing when you're talking about Quinn too, everybody's like talking about where he should be. I'm glad everybody had. I'm surprised that everybody had him. I'm glad that people value what he brings to Dallas. But here's the thing: I think if you were to rank how we feel about the defense, I think that's probably where people are sticking Quinn, like. Because they're absolutely right about there's parts about this defense that give us concern. And that's why I'm such a big Dan Quinn fan, because I've said before, this isn't a great defense. The Cowboys don't have a great defense. They have some great players and they have some good players, but Quinn makes them great. I mean, if you just go down the list of all these players that are just having career seasons look what we're getting from Jordan Lewis. Jordan Lewis is playing better than I've ever seen him play before. And you just go down the list. And Deron Bland, I don't think Deron Bland's a all-pro player by any stretch of the imagination. But look what he's doing. He has people thinking that he's just this great player. Anyway, so you talk about the Dolphins and the Lions and stuff. I think that Quinn responded really well against. They got smacked in the face against Buffalo. That was offense was trash, defense was trash, everybody was trash. But he responded. And I'll tell you what, you can say what you want about those games. He gave his offense a chance. They should have beat the Dolphins and they should have beat the Lions by more. And he's responded. Look how well the team has played better since. I mean, teams are struggling to run the ball against the Cowboys now. And you're talking about some really good, Dolphins have a great tandem of runners. So does the Lions. I feel like if you really lay things on the table, you would just see a well-coached defense that really is playing higher than their ability. And that's what we want in the playoffs. We want the Cowboys to deliver. We want them to be who they are. We don't want them to underperform. The defense is not going to do that because Dan Quinn is going to see to it, because these guys, they're only so good, but he makes them better.
Howman, you had a point.
We already know I had him at 4, so I respect Dan Quinn, but I have trouble like giving all the accolades of like it's a well-coached defense. Like they're the most penalized defense in the NFL. Like majority of the penalties, we talk about the Cowboys being so heavily penalized. Majority of that's coming from the defense, and it hasn't really. I mean, they've cut down on the penalties in the last couple of weeks, but that's been a consistent thing with the offsides, with the pass interference, with just untimely penalties. So, like again, I like Dan Quinn, but he hasn't fixed the penalty issues. They gave up the go-ahead drive both times against the Dolphins and the Lions, and they got lucky against the Lions. They couldn't convert on their like 15th 2-point conversion. So, I like Dan Quinn, but if we have to pick nits here, there's some inconsistencies there that haven't been addressed yet.
No, they didn't give up the go-ahead drive. They stopped him once. They stopped him again. And when the offense couldn't do anything, they couldn't do it a third time. I mean, at some point, you got to start ask yourself, what's really the problem? So, I mean, and I know that I've seen Howman's tweets and the criticism of Twin during while that was happening, which to me is laughable. I just think that you have to really look at everything and to make your decision. And I think when people over defend McCarthy, that they try to draw it back and say, hey, look, I know that as a team we're terrible at penalties, but look at Dan's doing these things too, and that there may be some truth to that, but you got to look at everything to make your decision.
This is supposed to be a positive show, and we'll kind of close things on a positive note, but for the sake of argument, because this is a question, Brandon asks, Tony, we'll start with you, who gives us the better future if one has to go? I'm going to change the question. You can only keep one. This is Survivor. You got to vote one off the island. You get to keep Mike McCarthy, Dan Quinn. Who is it and why?
Honestly, man, like it's not an easy question in my mind. I know
I asked it because I'm here with the smoke. Tony, welcome to the roundtable.
It's easy for Danny, but for me, like, I understand what Dan Quinn's done for this defense with the Mike Nolan and how he came in and changed everything. I completely understand that. But like Mike McCarthy taking over has proved Dak Prescott to play the best football of his life. So, I mean, I would begrudgingly say I'd rather keep Dan Quinn than Mike McCarthy. But if we lose Mike McCarthy, I'm afraid to see. Not that I doubt like Dak Prescott's ability, but like, why get the best of your quarterback and then what is it going to look like if he doesn't have him is a little different. So, I mean, I guess Dan Quinn, but I'm not confident in saying that.
I think Howman, you're McCarthy here, Danny, you're Quinn, right? Like we don't have to like rehash that out. Is that obvious? Could I get some head nods if those are the ones you're keeping?
Yeah, I'm picking the guy that's actually won a
Do
Super
you
Bowl.
need head nods?
Yeah, I mean that's true.
Let me think.
Sean, you can't break a tie because technically Dan Quinn is leading. But if you can only keep one, and right now this is the point of Survivor where like the whole tribe has been arguing and everyone's looking to you because you're kind of casting the like deciding vote. So who are you sending home and why?
It's keeping McCarthy for me, an offensive play caller. There's NFL franchises that set their team back, years by trying to be aggressive and get the right offensive play caller and promoting from within or going with the trends after, only a year or less of data. McCarthy's established. He works closely with your all-pro MVP quarterback, certainly a lot closer than Quinn does. So that's the key to having sustained success that the Cowboys have. It's a head coach and the quarterback, and you can't break that up right now when it comes to how well Dak Prescott putting up the career numbers with Mike McCarthy calling the plays for him. You can't do anything to change that if you want this team to continue to win games.
Forever DC says, so sick of hearing the is Mike McCarthy safe crap every year. He's staying, and I think unless the Seattle job comes up, Dan Quinn stays until we win a Super Bowl. Actually, I think this is not related to the trust thing. I feel more confident than ever that Dan Quinn isn't going anywhere. You look at all the like requests for head coaching positions. Like Dan Quinn has been requested by 3 teams, and that is significant. But he's nowhere near the like if you rank the top 5 like hottest candidates, like. I mean, look, we all think very highly of Dan Quinn, but I don't think he's there, right? Like Bill Belichick is definitely ahead of him, like for obvious reasons. Mike Vrabel's probably ahead of him. Again, he's had recent success as a head coach. You could make that argument, I suppose. People are all obviously going to be in on Ben Johnson. People are going to be in on Bobby Slowick, and depending how these playoffs unfold, there are a lot of names that I think are going to garner more interest this cycle than Dan Quinn, which works out in our favor because I don't think we have to have this conversation. I think that it's just not Dan Quinn's time. Maybe the Seattle job is a year away from him. Does anybody disagree?
I don't think it will be because he's not wanted. I think it will be because honestly, people I've been talking all this talk about McClay and Quinn. If they're even taking interviews, I'm alarmed because I feel like that the best part of this team is seeing something that they don't like as much as what they once did. So that part concerns me. I mean, Quinn's more than qualified to be a head coach. I just think it needs to be the right spot for him because, if you go to a spot like that struggles like Atlanta, then it's tough. I think he's got a great opportunity, and I hope he just stays put personally. And I will say this too. I don't want Mike McCarthy fired. But if I had to choose between the two, it's easy for me to make that decision. But I mean, I think Mike McCarthy works with Jerry Jones very well, and there's a lot of things that he does bring to this team that's helpful. So I want to make that clear. But I mean, I do have a greater appreciation for Dan Quinn.
Okay, let's end things positively. This is the player you trust the most on the Dallas Cowboys. Trust fall. You got to put your life in their hands. 2 of you went Dak Prescott. The other 2 of you went CeeDee Lamb. Let's go Tony, who do you think were the CD people?
I'd say Sean and Danny.
You know what, Tony? I'm going to give you 8 points because you were absolutely and completely correct. Tony, do you know something interesting about CD Lamb and this whole exercise?
No.
He was not on David Howman's list at all.
Wow.
So we gave you some grief for having CD number 5.
He's no Jake Ferguson.
So
that's
Howman,
coming up next podcast.
Howman, these were your 5 in order. Obviously, Dak Prescott, number 1. Mike McCarthy, good for you, number 2. DeMarcus Lawrence, number 3. Dan Quinn, who you just hated all over, number 4. And Jake Ferguson, number 5. CD Lamb's not on your list, but he's number 1 for Sean and for Danny Phantom.
Yeah, and I mean he's number 6 on my list, and I was going back and I had like those 3.
If he's number 6, also something about Howman's list, he doesn't have Micah Parsons on it. So Micah's not even in your top 6.
Yeah, and Mike is number 7, so
it's not a top 10, damn it.
there you go. No, like my thought process was with Micah, like the last few weeks, he either hasn't been getting sacks or he hasn't been getting a lot of pressures. This last week, he only had 1 pressure and it turned into a sack. That doesn't mean that he's not producing. Like his role at this point pretty much is he's like a black hole. He takes all the attention from the offensive line and he frees up all these other pass rushers to go ahead and feast. Like I'm not really worried about like being able to trust that he's going to do the thing that he does. Like at this point, he has that respect. Every offensive line is going to gravitate towards him and they're going to hold because they know they can get away with it. Kind of similar with CD, like, you know, I'm not really too worried. Like, it's not even a question of trust for me with CD Lamb. Like, I know what he is, even when he's not having, getting 12 catches a game. Like, that's opening things up for everybody else. So, this would have been a lot easier if it was just players, but because we put in coaches, I was like, I got to get Mike McCarthy in there. Like I said, I debated about Dan Quinn, but I was like, he deserves a spot for what he's done and what he can contribute in the playoffs. But if it was just players, those 2 easily making the top 5.
Tony, you had Dak Prescott on this list. Watsamata got really upset with everyone. Says, you got to be kidding me. The most trustless, and nobody had Micah first. Unbelievable. This is dark. You and Howman were the 2 people who had Dak first, but Howman's taken a little bit of a beating in the comment section right now for not having CD or Micah represented. Why, beyond the obvious, is Dak Prescott the person who you trust the most with the Cowboys right now?
I mean, he's having the best year of his career. He's in an offense that works perfectly to him. They said it from the beginning. He's playing with an edge. He's playing with a confidence, playing with a swagger that like makes me an absolute believer. And I know that all this time that I've, stand 10 toes down defending Dak Prescott, even, through the 15 pick year, and other people kind of discrediting his body of work, which I thought was nonsensical. There's really not many quarterbacks in the NFL you would take over him right now. Bona fide MVP candidate, even if he doesn't win it. The Cowboys are in probably one of the best hands going into the NFL when it comes to the quarterback position heading into the playoffs. Everything he's done to this point, I think this is kind of going to be his moment, right? It's more of a feeling, but it's also based on a body of work and everything he's been able to put together this season. Dak Prescott, if it ain't now, then when, right? I mean, year 8, comfortable, 30 years old, CD Lamb force feeding him at a time where we used to beg Dak to just feed it to your playmakers, right? Like, don't get cute, give it to your playmakers. He's not afraid to do that. He's found a perfect role for Brandon Cooks. He's got Jake Ferguson clicking on all cylinders right now. Everything is kind of working out for them, and I have my full faith and trust in their quarterback right now.
Sean, Brian says CD would be number 1 on my list. Hank would be number 2. Dak would be 3, and Micah 4, maybe Ferguson 5. You had CD Lamb over Dak Prescott, Sean. So why is CD Lamb number 1 for you?
It was somewhat interchangeable, but yeah, I think sticking to that theme of momentum and what it means going into the playoffs. CD had a season high 13 catches against the Lions, follows it up with 13 more against the Commanders. Prescott was perfect when targeting both CD Lamb and Jake Ferguson in that Commanders game, so you can see why both of them ended up on at least one of ours list for this Cowboys offense to be good enough to make a deep run to the playoffs. But yeah, the way Lamb is playing, the way that every aspect of the Cowboys offense is dialed in for him to have these big performances, I don't think we need to have the discussion anymore of Mike McCarthy forgetting he exists for long stretches of a game and letting the offense go quiet this is playoff time. The sense of urgency is up, and I think I am right there, ready to step up with it and be the guy that Dak Prescott can look to in any situation. And this team is going to move on to tougher matchups than the Packers, like the 49ers or what have you. We're going to need to see Lamb continue to make those plays, run after the catch, contested catches, red zone. He's going to have to take over all of those areas, and by putting him number one on my list, I'm trusting him to do so, and I think he's going to continue to be a strong player, obviously, for this offense to make huge plays down the field.
All right, this was a fun exercise. I enjoyed it, especially making you all feel uncomfortable about why you had certain players and people where you did, and instigating fights. I know that's a rare quality of mine that I display here on the roundtable, but I felt like leaning into it tonight. But it is time to kind of finish positively. We are still 5 days away from one of the biggest moments in the 21st century of the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think that's an exaggeration at this point in time. So it's closing statement time. This is the scoreboard at the moment. Tony in the lead by a hair, 79 points. Danny, Sean right there, 77. Howman, you're riding caboose. Again, the leaving Micah and CD thing off was a tough look for you for a lot of people. But still within striking distance. We're going to go in clockwise order here. Your closing statement can be whatever you want. It can be a prediction. It can be a passionate speech. It can be a declaration. It can be a battle cry. It can be pessimism. It can be whatever you want. But this is your chance closing the statement ahead of the first playoff game of the season. Hopefully first of many for the Cowboys. Howman, go.
Well, I'll start off. I mean, I took it on the chin, and I'll wear that with a badge for not putting Micah and CD on my list. And honestly, I look at it as a good thing, because if you're having this much trouble, putting guys in your top 5 of who you trust the most, and there's like legitimate debate of like, I can't believe you left this guy off. Like, you're in a good spot. This is a very talented Cowboys team. What they've done this season, the way that they've won so many games, to the point where people were like complaining that we win too many blowout games, like if that's a bad thing to beat your opponent and just beat them into the ground. And the way that they do that, and specifically do it consistently at home, having an undefeated season at home, and then the way that the kind of last 2 weeks fell into place for them to not only have a chance to get the division title, get the 2 seed, guaranteed 2 playoff games at home, and then they went out and they like took care of business. They didn't play with their food. They just went out there, won that game, shut it down. It feels so much different this season. I think that's really where a lot of this confidence comes from. There's a lot of guys on this team, like we just went through, that you can easily trust, and you just have so much faith in them that they're going to show up. And I spent so much time defending who I didn't put on my list. I didn't even get to talk about my number one guy, Dak Prescott, because that's really where it all starts and ends. Is like, we've seen this team and they go as Dak Prescott goes. And they've had a great season because Dak Prescott has had a great season because he's a great quarterback. And, I don't know if he's going to actually win the MVP or not. He's the MVP in my mind. I'm going to pull like a UCF when they went undefeated and didn't get into the title game. I'm just going to claim this as, Dak Prescott won the MVP. I don't care what the NFL says. He actually did win the MVP, because the way that he played all throughout the season, the way that he just, even through some of the bad moments, through some of the bad games, like, he came out the next week and he just balled out. He answered the call. There were times where he had to go down and lead a game-winning drive, and he did it. And there were times where like a defender just has him in the grasp, multiple different times where a defender has him in the grasp. He shakes out of it. He keeps his eyes downfield. He hits a guy for a first down, or, against Detroit, 92-yard touchdown to CeeDee Lamb. Incredible stuff. So, having a guy like that as your leader, as the guy that makes the engine go, how can you not feel confident? But then you look at everybody else on this team and it's like, yeah, I trust all of these guys. There's really not a whole lot of players on this team. I would struggle to come up with people I don't trust. So, however your top 5 list shakes out, Cowboys are in good hands right now.
Man, it's a tough scene for all y'all. That Howman went first. That was he picked up a lot of points in the chat, to say the least. Tony, Catalina, it's a big ask right now here, but you're made for this moment, dude. I mean, you have pulled off roundtable wins after roundtable wins. Your resume speaks for itself. Live up to the call, Tony, Catalina. Closing statement time. Let it rip.
Yeah. For me, I'm gonna go the passionate route. And for me, when I look at this Cowboys team, I think they're on a crash course where talent meets timing, right? I think a lot of it is it's their time. I think a lot of pieces had to fall in place for this team to become the number 2 seed, right? A lot of things had to fall in place for them to get to where they're at. We talk about how them being, real comfortable at home. Okay, well, let's make sure that almost every playoff game is going to be at home, right? The Cowboys have found a way to take scars and take their beatings over the years. The 49ers, divisional round, wild card round, the last couple of years, I think it's all led up to this moment, right? Where we have a nucleus of players that are scarred, are scorned, are hungry. I think a lot of things have come to this point where we are seeing an MVP caliber season from a quarterback. We are seeing a head coach who said, "Give me the play sheet. I'm making the calls with my own back up against the wall." We got a coach in Dan Quinn who obviously has immense respect in this roundtable and across the Cowboys fan base. Micah Parsons, a guy who understands what's at stake here when it comes to not just season but legacy. He knows that everything he does in the regular season really doesn't mean nearly as much as what it means to right now. We've been in this situation, like you said, almost 52 weeks to the day where we had saw our season end. And I remember, and I can almost get emotional thinking about we sit here and I'm like, I don't care about the regular season. I'm going to enjoy the ride. But we have thankfully gotten to the point where now we can lock in and say, this is where it begins, right? This is where it starts. Like all that other stuff is fun. 18 weeks of up and down, ebbs and flows. Cowboys 12-5 for the third year in a row. This is what Cowboys football should feel like. This is where it comes to a point where you can go and exercise a demon against the Green Bay Packers. You can go and if Detroit wants it, they can get it again, right? We can beat Detroit, and this time it can be a lot cleaner. And then if we got to go and slay the dragon of the 49ers to go into the Super Bowl, let's do it, right? Lock in. Because ultimately, there is no reason to not just empty it all right now. This is it. The Cowboys have everything going for them. There's absolutely no reason why anybody could sit on this panel or on any panel across any network, any station, anywhere, and tell you why the Cowboys can't win the Super Bowl. The Cowboys absolutely can. You got to do it one game at a time. Let's start one, let's start here. It starts with 4, and let's get 4.
This is shaping up to be pretty good. Man, Sean, I really am just kind of sitting back. Closing statement. Let's go.
Yeah, I have to go bold, and sorry, I'm not going to ever regret saying anything strong or bold about Dak Prescott on the internet, but I think this definitively is going to be the game where all but, the small subsects of the fans that will never be happy are going to finally admit that, this is the quarterback that can get the Cowboys to the promised land. This is going to be the game because if you ask even the most casual NFL fan about how they feel about a Cowboys-Packers playoff game, they're going to say, "Oh, don't the Packers always beat the Cowboys? And the Cowboys are going to lose first round. They haven't been good all year." A bunch of nonsense. This is going to be the game where Dak Prescott silences all of that. The Cowboys offense is going to put up huge numbers. That's nothing new at home, but in the playoffs, it hasn't exactly happened. They haven't had the right pieces to, play in a home playoff game like this, in a favorable matchup. Prescott's going to put up a 40-burger in this game, blow the Packers away, and start a playoff run where we can definitively talk about him as an MVP candidate for years to come. But it starts with what he's about to do to the Packers on Wild Card Weekend this Sunday.
Okay. I agree with you, Sean. I do think we have a big Dak Prescott game kind of lurking around the corner. And you're right that there is, there are the moles and the trolls that will scream what they want. They will never, ever, ever be happy. And I can't wait to see them squirm on Sunday afternoon. Danny Phantom, you've sat there, you've let it all marinate. You've heard everybody's, kind of closing thoughts and arguments and discussions. What are yours?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say, to be honest, because I feel like talk is cheap at this point. We come into this part of the season and we're all excited. And, I think that this is the year that the Cowboys have to deliver. They have, this is, as mentioned before, the opportunity in front of them. I mean, it hasn't been, the table hasn't been set so well as it has for them this season. So, I mean, we're healthy, Tyron's healthy, Dak's healthy, players are healthy. I really feel that, you look at this Cowboys team, there's nothing really that's looming over their head. They just have to go out there and perform. And that's what always gets us. We get to the postseason and the Cowboys are one of those teams that could do it, but they don't. And I want to believe that this team is different. I know that there's talent on this team, but honestly, the Cowboys need to come out there and play well, play consistent, play prepared, and not make things easy for their opponent, not give things away, not have these bad things happen, so we're sitting here at the end, talking about referees or, some weird thing that didn't go right. I don't want it to be like that. I want the Cowboys to be who they are. Go out there and this long game that's been preached to us and everything that's culminating to this postseason, I want to see it. And I believe that they have it in them. But like a lot of fans that have just been burned before, there's a lot of doubt, and I just want to see it. Starting off with a spanking, the Packers would be great. Let McCarthy check that off. That's got to feel good to beat Green Bay. And just keep barreling through. And but I think a lot of us, we just want to see the Cowboys be that real playoff team. Finally.
I think you all had really great and passionate pleas and points. This was my favorite part of the episode, if I'm being honest. The other stuff was fun, again, to kind of torment all of you, but this was really nice and sweet. Howman, I thought you came at this, with the, just the most like aggression in a really good way. Kind of, getting the party started on the right foot, kind of noting how this is a team full of people who we trust, which was obviously the theme of the entire show. Tony, I understand that you're coming from a point of like, look, I'm kind of done being afraid. Like, I'm kind of done, like not knowing how this is going to end. I waited exactly for this moment. I want this moment. I'm ready for this moment. And Sean, I love how you were just kind of like about the main thing. Like this is about Dak. Like we've all fought the good fight. Howman, you mentioned you've fought in the name of McCarthy. Like we all have scars from fighting on the internet and putting up with stupid people or stupid takes, whatever the case may be, in the name of proving who Dak Prescott really is, which is what's been so satisfying about this season, is that Dak has kind of done that on a global scale. And Danny, a lot of the chat said that, you were just about business. You weren't here for fluff for your closing statement. It was like, just time to do it. And I loved your obviously kind of, sentiment about being who you are. I feel like we have for so long chased the ghosts of the past. Like you have to go to San Francisco. You have to go get that monkey off your back. You have to do it because your forefathers in Cowboys lore did it. You have to beat the Packers. You have to go through Aaron Rodgers. You have to go to Lambeau Field. Who cares? Like you don't have to do anything. You just have to win 4 games. Like that's who you are. Like be that team. Be the team that like doesn't care about legacies. You're your own team. Yes, you are living in a shadow, but you owe no responsibility or debt to anything that happened before you. You owe everything to yourself and to yourself alone. And so that's what's really exciting about this. Dak obviously had the like line of the century about how like the pen is in their hands and they have the opportunity to write this kind of chapter. Look, I mean, I think we're all excited. I think we're all nervous, but it wouldn't be worth it if we weren't nervous. Like it wouldn't be beautiful if we didn't put something on the line and if we didn't put everything on the line. So well done, everybody. In fact, you all had at least 30 points in that final answer, which is what I think the Cowboys are going to do on Sunday afternoon at AT&T Stadium. And you all came to a point where you have 109 points. On January the 9th, you all had 1/09. That was not, anything I did. It was purely, totally, absolutely coincidence on a night
table overtime
in a week at a time where love, harmony, peace, joy needs to kind of be flowing all throughout the confines of Cowboys Nation. The roundtable winner is Dallas Cowboys fans everywhere. So good job, everybody, except for somebody who left Dak or CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons outside of their top 5. I don't know who that was, but whatever. So Tony, you get to speak on behalf of everybody, all of you and the chat, and even people who weren't here. How would you like to say thank you?
I don't want to have to say thank you. I want the Cowboys to I want to thank the Cowboys for what they're going to do to Green Bay. That's really it. That's all I want to say. This
Howman,
is like the end of the talk phase. So the end of it.
Howman, do you want to once again defend the CeeDee Micah thing, or do you feel like you've said everything that you have to on that front?
I'm just glad that this is replacing the Leighton Vander Esch take.
Yeah, we've come a long way from then.
Sean,
I don't know. Yeah, Sean, I feel like we've given you a lot of material for the future episodes of Hidden Yardage, but
yeah, what in the world? Leighton Vander Esch take?
2 years ago, prior to the 2022 season, when we did our 53-man roster prediction episode, Howman left Leighton off, and we all thought that was a bit silly, to say the least. Didn't age well. We've all got one of those. You know what I mean? That's Howman's.
Well, I just want to comment on the commitment that both Howman and I made to watch the Commanders game so we could go record the podcast afterwards. I know he was watching at a sports bar, and I walked through some snow to get to the place I was watching. So walking in the snow in downtown Bozeman to go watch the Cowboys win the division is hopefully not just the last memory that I have of this season in terms of good things to come. I want more playoff success starting with Sunday, of course.
Danny, you picked up a lot of attention in the chat for being a high note of positivity this episode. So I think you should send us home. The last words can be anything you want. They could be Cowboys related. They could be non-Cowboys related. But the final word is yours.
I can't wait to do it all again next week when we talk about how we're going to win the divisional round.
Yes, sir.